everybody. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the show where I talk to other writers and we have a good time. So it's kind of like inside baseball for writers. We go deep into the whole writing thing. So if you like hearing about writing, this is the place for you. I got a little inspired today. Sometimes when I talk to these other authors, they inspire me. They motivate me. I get excited about writing again. Not that I ever lost it, but sometimes it's nice to kind of feel that thrill and that energy of of a very ambitious writer. And today I spoke to somebody who, like I said, who inspired me. I spoke to Katie Sise. So Katie has several books out. Her recent release, actually, which is coming out soon and will be out by the time this podcast comes out, is The Break. So psychological thriller, suspense, good stuff, right up my alley. And she inspired me because she does so many different things. Like she was writing at an early age, like at age 8, but went to school and kind of studied drama and was going to be an actress, but that somehow transitioned into jewelry making, and that kind of blew up, and very famous celebrities were wearing her jewelry. And then she's been on TV a lot. She's been on QVC. She's done a lot, but she eventually got pulled back into the writing because she's a very creative person. And she's ghostwritten. She's written her own stuff. And she's doing all this while being a mother of 4. So she was very inspiring, and it was just great to see her energy and to share her excitement about the love of writing, how it's an escape every day. It's kind of almost a meditation. It doesn't feel like a job. There's a passion there for it. So it was great. I felt like we had a lot in common, and it was nice to have that conversation with her. So I hope you enjoy this. I certainly had a great time talking to her. This is my time talking with Katie Sise.
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Where are you? Where do you live?
In Bedford, New York. So I'm about an hour north of New York City.
Oh, is that like Sleepy Hollow kind of area?
That area. Yeah.
Oh, it's a good time of year for that.
It's really pretty. Like a lot of stone walls and leaves, and yeah, it's nice. It's
nice.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm in Colorado, and a few books ago I decided that I want to have my settings be in the Northeast, because the Northeast is kind of just creepy to me.
Northeast is totally creepy. Yeah.
So I've been kind of heavy into New Hampshire, but I went to school in upstate New York, so I know that kind of that kind of scenery. It's beautiful up there.
Where did you go to school?
Cornell.
Oh, fantastic! So when did you? That was my I ended up going to Notre Dame, but I was deciding between Cornell and Notre Dame. So maybe when did you graduate?
92, a long time ago.
Okay.
When?
01.
Yeah, I was a hotel school major.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. That was, I had no desire or interest or talent for writing. And I just kind of started writing when I was 33. Like on one day, I just started writing. It was this really weird thing, and I haven't stopped since. And I'm eager to talk to you because I feel like your story, your background, your kind of journey through the publication and writing process was also kind of not a direct line. So did you grow up in New York?
Yeah. So I grew up outside of Albany.
Okay.
And I was a little town called Loudonville, and I was always writing, definitely. I think from when I was 8 or so, I remember really wanting to do that, but I took a little detour in college, and I was an acting major, which was really fun.
So tell me about the writing when you were 8. Like how did that manifest itself, and why do you think you were just a naturally creative kid, do you think?
Yeah, I just love telling a story. And I also liked like the quietness of like being in my room and like writing a story. Like it was almost like a little escape, which is how it feels now. Like kind of a time to just like quiet down and think about characters and think about story. And
Well, you're kind of transporting yourself, right? In a way, it's like meditation. It's like you carve out that time. You're totally isolated. You're secluded, and you're journeying through a totally different world than where you existed 15 minutes earlier.
So, right. Exactly. And I definitely used to write plays that I would have my brother and my sister perform in, and we were always like, I just remember we were always like putting on a show. There was always like a show, a play, this, a that. There was a lot of like, and my sister's a doctor, and my brother is an investment banker. So they like got out of the business that I was trying to get them into with all those productions. But yeah, I mean, it was just,
and I'm sure they were much more successful because of that.
Yeah. Yes. I think they have much more like sturdier career paths, more job security than I have.
Right.
But yeah, and it's funny because my parents they're very encouraging of creativity, but they're not particularly creative. So I think they were kind of like, what
do I do with this?
Drawing a picture. But I always knew that I wanted to make my living creatively, and hoped that I would be able to do that, and sort of tried to figure out how I could do that. And I think always that it comes back to the story. Like, I love telling a story. I love being in a group and like knowing that I have a good story to like tell someone and make them laugh or something, or or have like a suspenseful story to tell, like even at preschool drop off. So I love a good story.
Right.
It's like how people connect. So I think a lot of it was that, and I think that when I started to act and study scenes and study plays and study like characters and dialogue, that ultimately was like kind of looking to connect, and through characters and story. Right. And so I was acting. So I was an acting major in college. I always wanted to be a writer when I was little, and still wanted to be a writer during college, and still wrote a ton during college. And my professors were really like very, very supportive of that.
So you were actively taking like creative writing and that kind of a thing. Yeah.
I was like actively and aggressively taking them. Like my professors were so nice. I would be like, I really need an independent study on Tuesdays where I just write some poems, and then you talk to me about the poems. I mean, they were really lovely with my like very sort of voracious 18-year-old self, who just like, I knew I wanted to, I don't know, work in entertainment. I had no idea how to get there. And I felt like if I just kept trying, hopefully it would happen. But so I was acting in a ton of plays, and I loved acting. I mean, it's just so much fun. And then I graduated and I moved to New York City. And what
was your degree in?
It was in film, television, and theater.
Okay.
And in fact, while I was at Notre Dame, I went and did one semester at NYU for musical theater. So like, almost like a study abroad. They let me go to NYU and do a semester at Tisch, where I found out I was like a horrible dancer and a pretty bad singer. Like I sort of thought like, oh, maybe I can sort of do this. And like, no, but I could act. So I like managed to stay there. It was fine. It went okay. And it was really fun. I did a ton of like independent films and student films, and it's, the energy of the city is just so wonderful. And so then I went back and graduated, and then moved back to New York City after college. And I was bartending, and I was sort of like I was auditioning a lot, but I found that what I missed when I tried to work as an actress professionally, I found that like I was really missing like the amount of rehearsing and work that we were able to do at college. So when you transitioned and you just sort of start to audition, it's like you might have like one audition every 3 days where you get to go in and say like one line. And I kind of missed the collaborative, I did get into a few plays, and that was really fun and awesome. But I kind of was just like, all right, I need to figure out a way to make a little money. So I bartended for a while, and then I worked at this little boutique, and it was a clothing boutique. It was when I was 24, and she had amazing things in there, like, and, jewelry and clothes. And I sort of, being like a very gutsy 24-year-old, I would not think this now, but I was like, you know what? I could make jewelry like this. I could make jewelry this cool. And so I made some jewelry, and this customer.
You had the equipment to make. I have no idea how jewelry is made.
I went to there's a jewelry district in New York, and you can go get like pliers, wire, beads, jewels.
Yeah.
It's like along 6th Avenue and like 35th. I'm not sure if they're still all there, but I bet a lot of them are. And so I found like all these beads and old stuff. And then I would go into Soho. There was this one store that had all this like old vintagey type stuff. So I would like throw it all together. The first pieces were probably really bad, I'm sure, but there was a customer. And so I used to wear it to the store. And this one woman was like, oh, I love that necklace. And can I buy it? And I sold it to her. And my boss, who is somehow still my friend today, because I should never have like sold her something that wasn't really for sale in the store. But my boss was like, all right, if you're going to be like selling stuff off your neck, we're going to make you a little shelf here. And, you can sell your things here. So I did that. And so for a little while, it was just like one of those crazy things. Like I think it's because it wasn't the be all end all. It wasn't like the thing I set out to do. So you know how sometimes those things almost come easier. Like then all these magazines started covering it and all these celebrities started buying it. And so then I sort of thought to myself, like, okay, if this weird jewelry thing is working, like is taking off in this strange way, I was like, maybe I should sort of think about trying to do more on-camera stuff as like a style expert or go talk about jewelry or whatever else. So I got an agent that way, like an on-air agent. I did all these really random TV segments, and I had this one gig in my late 20s where I would go down to the Home Shopping Network. They would fly me down to Tampa and I would like talk about jewelry. I mean, as you can tell already, I can talk about anything for like a very long.
Talking about your jewelry or just jewelry
other jewelry. So in fact, it was this specific jewelry line. And so I would go on talking about like how you would wear it or what you would wear it to or what you would, God only knows. It was like, it could be like 2 a.m. We would talk for like, I'm not kidding you, we would talk for hours. And it was so fun. And I was like, well, this is a job that I'm made for, So it was a blast. And then I got to think, okay, you know what? There should be a book, as one thinks. There should always be a book about everything. So there should be a book about, and there were lots of good career books, but I thought like maybe one that talked a little bit about sort of being open to your career in a more, it's just such a circuitous path when you're creative and there's so many things that could happen. And if you say yes to a lot of things, I mean, you have to say no too, of course, but if you can be open to your career, kind of taking these different routes.
Yeah. I mean, you're putting yourself out there. I mean, you're telling me this whole story and I just think about the serendipity of the person who saw, the necklace that you did that begat everything else. But that took you kind of just putting yourself out there and being unafraid and just like, why not?
Totally. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And not being too afraid to fail, kind of being okay with a little bit of just, embarrassment or whatever you would call, like and I am still okay to fail. Like I feel I was just having this conversation with someone about even like reviews. Like I'm okay with, like
you have to be okay with it. You have to embrace failure. I think, I mean, I teach all the time about the power of rejection because it's such a learning mechanism. And for writers, it's 90% rejection and you have to lean into that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my first novel, I remember I wrote this novel. I loved this novel and that didn't sell. So there's a bunch of projects I've had that certainly have not sold. And I sometimes feel like the difference between a published writer and a non-published writer is just that the published writer kind of like generally they keep going, keep trying.
Perseverance.
And I also don't think, this is the kind of thing where if I heard someone on a podcast who was published say this, I might be like, oh, come on, you don't know what it's really like. But there is still a part of me that thinks, okay, this is a job that I would do whether I was published or not. Like I love to write. I love the moment my dad reads the story. Like I love when my sister reads it. So I think creativity for creativity's sake, like there's a lot of stuff that I love to do that I don't get paid for that, and getting a paycheck is really important, of course, for a lot of things. But,
well, I think as a writer, you have to kind of embrace the fact that it's not for, the vast majority, it's not something you're going to make a living doing. And so, I mean, and I'm like you, right? So I never quit my day job. And my first 3 books, I got an agent with my first book, but my first 3 books never sold. And I just decided I enjoy storytelling. I like doing this and I want to get better and I want to learn it. And that's where the rejection becomes very powerful and allows you to kind of, subsume your ego. So, if you had I'm sure you get asked this question too, how did you keep going after your first book didn't sell? And it's like, well, I didn't expect it to sell because I didn't know what I was doing, but if you have a huge ego, it's hard to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think like when you really put the value on the actual writing, I think that makes it a little easier because you're like, well, of course I'll keep writing another one because I'm a writer. And that's what I do.
Right. So tell me about that decision to write that first book. You had all this, self-directed and college-directed writing experience. So you had kind of the mechanics, I guess, but you probably hadn't written a novel before, had you?
No, I'd never written a full novel, certainly plenty of partials, but I would say that was really the first full novel. And I had sold that first book called Creative Girl. That was the career guide. And as you probably know, nonfiction books are kind of notoriously a little bit easier to sell.
Right.
So I kind of was like, oh, this must be how it goes. You just write a proposal and then somebody buys your book,
Right. No, you have to write the whole damn book and then nobody buys it.
Buy it anyway. Right. Exactly. So I wrote the whole book, and it was this paranormal romance. My agent loves this book, and he's always like, we got to dust that book off and try to sell it. So yeah. And so then
so this is a different agent.
My same agent.
Does literary as well. Okay.
Yep. And I just adore him because he's really supportive, and he's always saying like, sure, let's try that. Like if I have an idea, he's generally like, let's do it. Let's try it. We can make it work. And so we didn't sell that one. And then he said, all right, we got to keep going. We got to keep, we can keep working on other things. And in the meantime, I ghost wrote. I wrote a sample for a ghostwriting company, and like a book packager, and I ghost wrote a series, this New York Times bestselling mystery series. And so that was really good practice. I did 3 books for them. So I got paid as a ghostwriter, so under somebody else's name, but I got paid a fee to write the book, so I did 3 of those, and it was really good practice. It was kind of like learning how to write a mystery novel under someone else's name, which I was grateful to do. I was grateful to get paid for writing and sort of to learn it. And then
so they didn't write anything themselves.
Probably during revision, I think there's a lot that they probably do, like when they get the book turned into them. I would imagine there's some stuff where they're like, oh, I wouldn't say it like that, or make it better or something.
I find that whole thing so strange, to be honest, because it's like, if there's multiple books coming out under that person's name and they have different ghostwriters, how do you avoid the voice being so disparate between books? And maybe that's good. Maybe you want a different sounding voice, but
maybe they're like maybe it's even better because maybe people are like, gosh, this writer is such a chameleon. How does she sound so different?
Right.
And they're like, I'll tell you how.
That sounds so unsatisfying. Not the ghostwriting, just the being that person and being like, okay, I didn't really do much here, but whatever. That's my own.
Yes, right. Like to each their own. And like, I think the truth is like, if you get so big and you can't fulfill your contract for any reason, like it could be illness, it could be you. And then I think that's where a ghostwriter comes in. Like if for some reason you're too overbooked or whatever, or you're just too big. I have not had that problem yet. No one has.
I have not had that problem yet either.
Suggested that I get a ghostwriter. I'll have you know. So after
you had that experience with those 3.
With those 3. And then I felt like, okay, so now I've written a bunch of novels, and I kind of was like, all right, I'm ready here. Like, let's go. And I happened to talk to this woman, this amazing woman in publishing. Her name is Brenda Bowen. And she said, I'm thinking about this idea for this book. And the book would be called The Boyfriend App. And it would just be an app that could get a girl any boyfriend that she wanted. So she said, like, go with that. Like, that was like the one sentence. And as you know, as a writer, the one sentence, you think like you can think you have the best idea ever, but then you have to make it work, which is like the work, right? That's the story in the work. So she was awesome. She was just like, you go, take it, do what you want. Let's sell it together. And we did. We sold it. She was an agent at my agent's agency. And so we sold it to Alessandra Balzer at HarperCollins. And that was we had the best working relationship. She was a wonderful editor. And I did 3 books with her. And then after that, at that point, I did 3 novels with them. I would have been like in my mid 30s, somewhere around there. And I remember I had a pretty, like a hard revision on the 3rd book that we, not hard, but just like a lengthier revision than usual on the 3rd book that we did together. And my agent when I turned it in, my agent said, why don't you take this summer and just relax and write the book that you would want to read this summer. Like just write a book for yourself, the book you would want to read. And then I wrote We Were Mothers, which is my first adult novel and a psychological suspense. I wrote it in 6 weeks because I couldn't wait to see what happened.
Are you on Adderall or something? How do you write a book in 6 weeks?
No,
That's
I'm on
amazing.
caffeine. I just was having this conversation with someone. No, I've never tried. No, I'm actually only on caffeine.
Me too.
Literally. It's really something.
I mean, during the day, during the night, I'm definitely.
I want to know what I would be like on something because I think it would be out of control. It would be like 10 books in a day. So
let's stop for a second. So I want to ask about this book, We Were Mothers. So 6 weeks.
Yep.
Did you have it fully formed in your head? Because I'm a I'm a pantser. Like I have zero clue of what I'm doing.
Like
And
zero.
so it takes me a while to write a book.
So, okay, I go in the opposite direction. If I outline, it will take me longer because I'm like a little bored. I know who did it. I like to not know who did it. I like to not know what anyone is going to do during the novel. And I like to sit down and watch it like a TV show.
Yeah.
I'm generally pretty surprised by who my killer is or
right. Like what happens next. Right.
what happens next. And
Totally.
I get a general sense of like where they're going to go. Like I feel like, all right, I got to get them out of this house. The next scene should probably be like on location at blah, blah, blah. But
Right.
then I really watch them. And then sometimes I think that they're going to, like, there were two characters in the break that's out on the first. I felt like I thought for sure that they were going to get together, like romantically get together, and that was going to be the impetus for all this other stuff that happens. And I kept putting them in scene together and like they would not get together. So I was like, okay, guys. And so then I figured out something else that would be sort of a motivator for everything that does unfold. But yeah, I love to watch them. So I'm also a pantser and I can't do it another way. I might have an idea for like a hook or like a twist. I might have an idea for when I start the book, like a twist, but
Right.
generally I let it kind of just unfold.
And usually that's not going to be the only twist. Like I find I'm the exact, I mean, I start with, I just have an opening scene that I'm like, I don't know what this scene means, but this is a really weird scene. And if I were watching this on a Netflix series and this was the opening, I would totally want to know more. And then I spend the rest of the book trying to solve what the hell that scene was about.
I totally agree.
And there might be hooks, but usually those hooks are like, that happens like when I'm writing that night. I'm like, what if this person just died right now? You know, what would that mean? And maybe I'll go down that path and then you cut out 3,000 words because it doesn't work, or maybe it changes the nature of the book entirely.
Yeah, totally. And then how do you turn that? Everyone asks me this question. I don't have a good answer. So I'm going to ask it to you. How do you turn off that imagination? Like when you're out on the street and you're like, what if that guy just dropped dead right now? Like, I feel like my imagination is like, well, what if we were at this birthday party and then this like insane thing happened? Would you do that in your real life or just in your work?
I do that in my real life, but I think that's fun. Like, you know, I guess I don't get carried away with it. In terms of my book, I'm not thinking about, like, I write for an hour a day. That's it. And I don't think about my story.
I'll try for
I don't think about the book at all, pretty much, until I sit down, close my eyes. Where was I? Okay.
Right.
And then I'm in that world and I can get out of it. Unless it's something like particularly dark, it takes me a little time to ramp back out of it. But I don't know if my, that's a really good question. I don't know if my creativity kind of takes over other aspects of my life. But I mean, I think most of what we do during our normal lives or whatever is all kind of about storytelling at one way or another, you know, whether you're in the business world or you're, you know, with your kids or whatever, it's all coming down to kind of crafting stories. I find it's funny. There's a line through all of that.
I totally agree.
Are your kids creative? How old are your kids?
They are. So they're 11, 8. My two boys are 11 and 8. And then I have 4.5-year-old twins. And in fact, when I was writing, when I was writing We Were Mothers, the main character had twins. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, this sounds really hard. Like, whoa, it must be hard to be a mom of twins. I mean, awesome, it must be awesome, but also like, wow, this is intense. And then I turned in my draft and then went for my sonogram. And she was like, do you have twins in your family? And I said,
no.
No. I said, do I now? And she was like, yes. And I was thrilled. I'd always wanted 4. So it was like the best surprise ever.
Wow.
I always wanted.
How do you? Yeah. Like I get the question all the time, like, how do you manage everything? And I'm listening to you and I'm like, this is insane. Like I wrote my first book, like when we were pregnant with our first child. And now I feel like that's like, I'm about to get a puppy and I'm keeping my voice low because my kids don't know that. And I'm already having stress dreams about how am I going to do everything? It's overwhelming.
How old are your kids?
They're old. They're 17 and 19 actually. And my 17-year-old's here and my 19-year-old's in Michigan State. So she'll be coming back for Christmas and we're going to pick up the dog then. So I know, but I'm already stressed out about it because I feel like my life is so full and I'm listening to you and I'm like, you must have tremendous ability to compartmentalize, I'm guessing.
And I also I think one of the cool things about with writing is it doesn't. So because people will say that, they'll be like, oh, how do you do that? And I'm like, but that's like me saying to you, to this, whoever says that to me, I feel like that's like me saying oh, how do you go get a massage and manage your family. Like to me, the writing is like the escape. It's like almost like going to the gym. So the writing is the thing that I enjoy so much, and the kids are what I enjoy so much. I don't enjoy cleaning.
Right.
I mean, things I don't enjoy, but like I love being with the kids and I love the writing. So I try to fill the day with as much of those two things, and other things fall by the wayside.
Yeah, or you get help. I mean, as you get older, you learn like how to like, this doesn't make me happy. I'm not going to do this anymore. And it's amazing. Like, and I think when you're younger, you try to do everything. And maybe it's because you're trying to find that thing that brings you joy. And I'm totally the same way. The writing brings me joy, but it's not, I think the key is it can't always be joyful.
Right.
You have to look at it as this is my work also. And just like day jobs, sometimes it sucks. But that's I think the difference between a lot of published writers and struggling writers is that person, like you said earlier, that perseverance, do it every day, and not every day is going to be fun. But it's like working out, though. You build that muscle and you get better, and you have less of those bad days.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is a job, and there are times when it's not fun, and depending on whether you're stuck, like if you're stuck in a novel, so you like really want to put it aside.
Right.
Those are definitely the moments where you're like, oh, geez, this is feeling like.
Yeah, a great example is now like talking about, kind of rough revisions. The novel I'm working on now has gone through multiple revisions because I wrote something that was different and I knew it was going to be problematic, and it was just something that spoke to me and I wanted to write about it. And so now, I'm working with my editor, and I'm literally changing the entire novel from third person past tense to first person present tense.
Well, that's a bitch.
And I've never done that before. And you have to look at every single word because most of them change, and you have to change, the voice changes once you do that as well.
Right.
And so I'm just trying to get through 10 pages a day, and it's not fun. It's really hard work, and it's kind of interesting, but it's like
really tedious points. Yeah.
But my other option is to just drop the novel, or they're like, we'll still publish this, but we think it can be better. And so I'm curious about you. So you started from kind of self-help type of stuff to paranormal romance to domestic suspense thrillers. What was that? Do you think you were kind of finding yourself in that process, or were you kind of looking to like, what do I think will sell best?
That's such a good question. So when I first started writing the young adult stuff, I had taken a young adult writing class with this wonderful teacher, Nicole Ostow. She's a writer, and I loved taking a class with her. And I also felt more like a young adult at that time. So I started taking that class. I was 28, I think, when I started that class. I think I was 28 years old. And like, I felt like a young adult. I was only just married. I hadn't had kids yet. And so I think I just felt like I understood it better. Whereas now I feel really far removed from the time of someone in high school. And I would like to go back to writing some young adult, but I think that's going to involve like me really, whether it's like, I spend a lot of time talking to my younger cousins. I have a lot of cousins. So like, I have to just really listen better and like understand like what I want. If I do it again, I want to really do it right.
But you seem like an empathetic person to me. And that's the best writers, I think, have deep wells of empathy where they're able to, get into that mindset as much as possible. As much as possible.
Yes. I have like many, many flaws, but I do recognize that I have deep wells of empathy, like to the point where I almost can understand anything. Like when someone tells me something, I'm like, I totally understand like how you might,
which can also be crippling, because you can take over other people's emotions, and sometimes that just gets stuck in you.
Sure. Definitely. So I would say it was more about that. It was more like what I felt like at the time, because I remember really getting my mid-30s and feeling like, oh my gosh, I want to write about women my own age, and women who are in marriages, and women who are in and who have children or who don't. But I wanted them to be somewhat more my contemporaries. Also, we moved to this area, and I felt like I was driving along these winding roads. I knew no one, but there were all these like really interesting homes. And I'm like, my God, what happened? I always just feel like, what happened?
What's going on behind those beautiful front doors? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Right. And so I remember sort of thinking, okay, I wanted to set something that was in a town much like this. And then, so I would say that was more where I was going. So I do pay attention to the market. I try to read stuff that sells really, really well, more because I think that person has figured out some really good storytelling elements rather than I think by the time you probably go with what the market's doing, it's probably too late anyway.
It is. Yeah, it's a 2-year, you write the book and then it's going to be out. If you sell it, it's going to be out 2 years later and the market may very much change.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But some people are good at that, but I think chasing the market is usually, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And also, like, you still want to write what is interesting to you, like you were saying, like writing about contemporaries, but you could have written about, women your age in towns like yours, and it could have been, it could have been rom-com, it could have been whatever, but you went kind of dark.
Yeah, I did.
Because do you like the conflict? Do you like just throw stuff at your character? I'm like, what are you going to do now? Because it's a little bit of like, what would I do?
What would I do? Oh, it's always like, it's always, and in this particular novel, my characters are so much like me. I don't always do that. But this one, for some reason, the break came out feeling like the two main characters were, one of them is like me as a new mom, and the other one is like me when she first came to the city and was a 22-year-old. I kind of was like very wide-eyed when I came to New York, like trying to figure out how to be a creative person, trying to figure out how to be an actress or a writer and all these things, with all these kind of like a desire to do things. But in general, even if the character is not at all like me, I'm always thinking like, what would I do?
Right.
I did hear somebody once talk about, or maybe I said it. I don't know. I never. Did I say this? Well, okay. But let's just say it was someone else for the sake of the idea that like you can't be nice to your characters. You have to throw stuff at them that you don't want to do that because you end up loving them. I mean, I love my characters, even my bad ones, but you have to throw awful things, and there's that feeling like there's like when things are going really well in a novel, and then you throw something, and then it's like unfortunately even more devastating to your readers. But
yeah, totally. And I don't know where that comes from, but I think that's fascinating because a lot of times for me it's not even calculated. I in a couple novels ago I had a scene where somebody unexpectedly dies, and it was just so brutal. I mean, it was an accident, but it was so sad, and I didn't know it was going to happen. I'm like, what if this just, because to me it's all about the what if, like what if this, what if that. It's just constantly going, and it ended up being like such a pivotal scene, and it wasn't planned, but I'm just like, it broke my heart. I'm like, why? What compelled me to do that? And ultimately I'm like, just because I want to see everybody getting tested. Yeah. Right. Everybody has to react to this, and everyone, and some people don't make it out of that test. But you're always, like you said, you love your characters, so you're rooting for them. So that makes, if they're able to punch through to the other side, it's that much more rewarding of like, not only did you get through this, but by getting through this, you've kind of addressed all these other issues in your past that had been sitting inside you for decades. And it took this traumatic event for you to rise to the occasion.
Yeah. And I've heard someone say once, like, why does this story need to be told now? And I always think that's an interesting question to ask. Why is it now? Like, why in this person's life? And so that always has to be like, there had better be a big answer to that question, and sometimes it takes a big life event for it to justify like a story being told right at this moment.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Why now is a bit, my agent says that a lot, like, like, especially if you have kind of a darker person, a villain, maybe coming to light after years, like, why now? Like, what's the motivation? Like, why are they doing this? And so it is difficult because I'll be writing and I'll just be writing and I'm enjoying it, but I'll hear my agent or my editor in my head being like, this doesn't make sense. I'm like, I know it doesn't make sense, but I like it. Let me just do it.
Let me just do it. It'll be easier if I do this. Right.
So what is your relationship now? Like, because now you're with Amazon Publishing, right?
Yep.
What is your relationship with that editor like?
Oh, fantastic. I mean, my editor's name is Carmen. She's just really, really smart, and she's really good at what she does. And she's also really fair. And it's always nice when you're working with someone who, like, she holds me to high standards, but they're really fair. Like, I feel like we both want a good book, and we both know that we both want that, and we want to get there, and we're willing to work hard to get there. And my deadlines are really fair. I always feel like I can make them happen. And
well, yeah, if you're writing novels in 6 weeks, I'm sure your deadlines.
Right. But the recent ones have not been 6 weeks. I have to say, like, Open House and The Break just took so much longer.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I always feel like the first one of a new thing is always like dopamine, like you're like, oh, this is the best. I'm writing something new.
My very first novel, it took 90 days. And it was terrible and never sold. But I think you also, I think there's also something about like you're cherishing the time you're spending writing rather than trying to make a deadline for an uninteresting project just to get it done. You're like trying, and you're getting better and you're learning. And that's the whole thing with like you were saying about the editor feedback. It's like, it can be brutal and it can be discouraging, but at the end of the day, everyone's trying to make your book as good as possible. Yeah. And you got to embrace that, right?
And even the negative reader feedback, like if you have, you have bad reviews on Amazon or whatever you have, maybe you don't have any bad reviews, but I mean, I do. And so, it's like even to me, I'm like, well, thank you to that person for reading it. Because I think you have to always say to yourself, okay, like if you're at the place where you're getting reviewed, whether that's in a class or you're in a group of people or your friend read it, or you did publish it and it's on Amazon, it's still someone who read your work and you were brave enough to write a novel. So you already wrote a novel, and now you have people reading it. Those are all such great things that,
Yeah, totally. I think reviews are tricky because I always say it's a balance, right? Like, because first of all, however precious you want to be about your book, it's a commodity that you're trying to sell and make money from. And like anything else you might put on Amazon, you want to get feedback and understand, was my product, liked?
Yeah.
But you also can't go down that rabbit hole too far. But if you have enough people saying, that ending was terrible,
sure,
that might inform you a little bit for your next book. There's nothing wrong with that.
You know what? I had a bunch of people say for We Were Mothers, and I took this note and like really applied it to the next two books. They talked about how they felt like there were too many characters introduced all at once. So I had a big opening of We Were Mothers. It would be great like on camera. It was like a birthday party. It was like a toddler birthday party that just goes awry. And but that felt to readers like just too many characters introduced at once. And they had
because how you read something is totally different than how you're watching something.
Of course, you remember that Nicole Kidman is playing the part of whatever.
Right.
Oh, right. Because she's unforgettable. But I feel like, when you're writing it. So I took that advice to heart, and really the next two times around, and I'll do it again for the next two books that are coming out. At some point, I'll be slow and easy with like how really let people get to know some characters first, and then throw everybody into a big birthday party, in chapter 6 instead of 1 or something.
Right. And I tend to write how I read. So when I read, I read in small bursts, and it's usually in bed at night. So if there's a bunch of characters introduced at once, I get confused. So I tend to write very straightforward. I don't describe a lot of things, but when I do describe something, I try to distill it to as few most powerful words as I can. And so and that actually helps with pacing too, because then all of a sudden you're just like, you just suck somebody in because they're just burning through your pages. But it's not intentional. It's just like, that's how my brain works,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So you're
the other thing, readers, like writers, the more you read, the more you get the cadence of storytelling, right? Like,
I think so. I get distracted by reading other people's books. It depends on what it is, because sometimes I'm like, I like that voice, or I'll go the other end and be like, oh, I totally would have done a better job with this, or whatever.
Right, whatever it is that you're thinking. Yeah. But even other storytelling mediums too, like TV helps me too. Like, or if I get like really inspired if we go to the movies or something, and I'm like, oh yes, I love storytelling.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. TV shows. Like I sit down and, when I'm done at night, I'm watching a show and I'm studying, like, why do I like this so much? And I'll analyze like, how is she looking at me at the camera? That's amazing. Like, and how would I translate that into words? So I'm much more inspired by TV shows and movies than by other books, I think.
Yeah.
So, and then your next book comes out very soon. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Does it get old or no?
No, it does not. I really get really excited when the hardcovers arrive. That moment, like when the box comes and you're like, hey,
the smell, right? Just the smell of your books. There's something about like, it's so visceral.
Them like under my pillow before. Like I feel like they've made their way. Like sometimes I put them like somewhere random, but then I can just see it because books are so pretty. Books are beautiful, and no, it never gets old, and I don't think it ever will. Like or like if you see it in a bookstore and you just want to totally spaz out and just be like, oh.
Right. Or your friend takes a picture from another state and it's like, I saw this in the bookstore. And you're like, oh, that's so cool.
Oh, yeah. Or have you ever, I'm sure you have because your book sells so many copies, have you seen a random reader that is not your aunt?
I have not had that experience yet.
Okay, so I have not, okay, I've not had it. I've had someone send me a picture of a woman at a pool, the book. And I actually thought that I could so not believe that it was a stranger. I thought maybe it was like someone he knew or he brought his copy. I don't know. And then no, she was randomly reading like a library version of We Were Mothers. And I've had the experience now of when someone's just already read it by chance before they knew you. And that puts me over the edge. Like a girl.
Right. They're like, wait, did you write? I just read that.
That's right. And that makes me, my mind is just like, I can't believe you, like, it just is still so startling.
Right. Even if they hated it, who cares? That's so cool.
It's so great. Yeah, I know. Right. I'm like, it's really, I still feel blown away that people like read them. And then and my favorite thing is like when people talk to me about my characters, like they're real. That's just like, that's how I feel about them. So I just feel like that shared experience of talking about, it's like the same reason that people do book clubs. It's like, it's fun to talk about characters.
Totally. I've had experiences where people have asked me questions about some of my earlier books and I don't even remember. I'm like, I don't know who that is. Unless, main characters I remember, but well, what happened to that? I'm like, I don't know who that is because it's just out of my mind. It's so funny.
It's really, no, it's really funny. My one friend once said to me, she's like, well, did you base that one character on me? And I'm like, no, I did not,
Right. I know. That happens all the time. Well, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do a little storytelling since it's clearly in your bloodstream to be a storyteller and you can be you're a pantser. So that works well. So I just kind of grabbed 3 random books off my bookshelf. And I'm going to have you choose one of them. And then we're going to choose a random page and a random sentence. I'm going to read that sentence. And then that's the first sentence of a 2-minute long short story. You give me a couple sentences, then I'll do the next couple. So it'll be a shit show, but it'll be great.
It'll be great.
So I've got Ali Land's Good Me, Bad Me.
Okay.
Stephen King's Joyland, kind of a pulpy novel. And Randall Silvis's 2 Days Gone. So choose one.
Let's do 2 Days Gone.
Okay, it's a great book. Randall's a very good writer. And give me a page or give me a number between 1 and 380.
Let's do 93.
Okay. And then give me a sentence number between like 1 and 10.
7.
Okay. I'm going to read 2 sentences because it makes more sense to do this. Already the night felt several degrees cooler. Where to now? He wondered.
Marshall buckled his daughter into the back of the convertible, and off they went into the night.
It was raining lightly. He could almost feel the road slipping beneath his tires, and he looked back at his daughter just to make sure she was safe. He was going faster than he knew he should have. And he also knew he shouldn't have had the 2 drinks before making this trip. But he's made mistakes before.
He slowed down and looked back to see his daughter already asleep. Just before he turned to look at the road again, he noticed taillights rounding the bend behind him.
He slowed down, but it was too late. He hit the rear of the other car, and it made a crunching sound and spun his convertible 90 degrees. He didn't remember breathing.
Relief washed over him when he heard his daughter cry from the back seat, sounding okay. But where was he? Were they both really all right? And who was the woman walking toward their car?
That relief didn't last long. It lasted as long as it took that woman to reach the front of his car. He rolled down the window and instantly recognized her. Where the fuck were you going? She said.
Her eyes bearing down on both of them, she checked to make sure that her daughter was all right.
Yeah, I think we ended it there because I think we were going to the exact same place. That's perfect.
That is so fun. I want to start doing that with like my kids.
Yeah, totally.
That's
totally.
a good exercise.
It is. And I say this a lot, it's improv, right? And what's great about it is with kind of the conceit of improv is you have to accept what I say and I have to accept what you say. It's all the yes and, right?
Always yes.
So, and I always think it's interesting to see what kind of almost emotional vibe you start to get into with the person you're doing it with. And, and it's because sometimes it's, because I've done 70 of these and I got to do it every time. And sometimes it's rough. Sometimes it's just like, oh, this is like, I got nothing. And I think I got nothing because I think they have nothing.
Right.
And, but you just play off of each other, and it's always interesting.
Right. Well, it makes you think too about how people who write together, there's so many writers who, if we did that in longer form, you would write a chapter, I would write a chapter, you would write a chapter. And we there are writers that do that. I'm impressed. My friend, Greg Wands, they write under E.G. Scott. They write really fantastic suspense novels. And I know that they pass chapters back and forth. I mean, that's so impressive. The good news is
impressive.
Keep you on a deadline, because you wouldn't want to be the person holding on to the next part of the story. You'd kind of keep going.
Unless you're doing it, because I've always had this kind of idea too, almost doing it as a side project that maybe doesn't have a deadline, but that it's like, I've always wanted to do this with a woman, with a female writer, and just say, hey, let's write a book and we're each going to be a voice. And we don't even know what the book is about, but I'm going to write the first chapter, and then you have to, so it's this exercise we just did in novel length, and who knows where it goes. And maybe it's terrible, but if you're only doing a chapter at a time, how much fun would that be?
Yeah. And if you wrote in a man, woman, boy, so you're thinking that they would take on each of the characters and then.
Yeah. But I personally, I prefer to write from a female point of view. So maybe you even reverse the roles like that.
Right. Yeah, that would be surprising too and interesting. Yeah, I like that.
So who knows, but we all have a lot going on. So
you have a puppy. You have a puppy coming. Once you're puppy trained, you can.
Oh my God, I'm so scared. I can do it. What a pleasure to meet you, Katie. And I'm very excited for your next book. And it was fantastic to hear about all your success. And just I gotta say, I'm a little inspired, and I'm a little motivated now. I feel like I can do more stuff. I don't have to be so intimidated by waking up in the moment and thinking of all the things I've got to do. I've got this.
You'll hear my voice.
It was great to talk to you. I really appreciate your time.
I was so honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Take care, Katie. Bye. So that's it. That's my conversation with Katie Sise. I had a great time. I could have gone, I could have talked a lot longer with her. I felt like we were just kind of hanging out at a bar, kind of comparing notes about being authors. And when I kind of get into that mode, time just flies. So definitely could have gone on longer. If you want to find out more about her and all her different things that she does, that she is successful at, go check out her website at katiesise.com. That's SISE.com. And if you want to find out more about me and all the different things that I do, go to my website, carterwilson.com. I would appreciate it. And please sign up for my newsletter while you're there, because it kind of kicks ass. So that's it. That's it for now. More episodes will be coming out soon. But in the meantime, I always appreciate you watching and or listening to this. Take care.